Today is December 11th, 2020. After today, there's only 20 more days of this year, meaning that 2021 is almost here. So much has happened this year, but I'm pretty happy that this year's almost over because a lot of the stuff that has happened this year has been pretty negative. A lot of people's lives have been lost, a lot of people have been kicked out of their homes because they can't pay the bills. All sorts of things have happened, but I want to talk about in this video, I want to talk about two recent Supreme Court cases. One of them just was one of them was just declared today, one of them was declared yesterday. And the one I want to talk about first was the one that took place today, the one where the decision was given today, basically. And this basically has to do with the results of the 2020 presidential election. So basically, the Supreme Court today rejected a bid from Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton, and this was also supported by President Trump, obviously, because it's his re-election that was on the line. So obviously, Trump himself would support it. He's the one who wants to get re-elected more badly than anyone else. So it would make sense Trump himself would support it. And basically, he wanted to block a lot of ballots in some of these battleground states because of the claims that either there was voter fraud or they didn't meet certain rules. But the court basically just slapped down the case, slapped down the lawsuit because this has been a common trend. Some of these Republicans in certain states, the ones that are diehard Trump supporters especially, they have been filing many lawsuits across all these different swing states. This has actually been going on for the past month, ever since it was declared that Joe Biden won the presidential election. Certain Republicans in the different swing states, or for the different swing states that Joe Biden won in, such as Minnesota, Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, and even Georgia, these Republicans have been filing lawsuits claiming that there was some sort of fraud taking place or that ballots that shouldn't have been counted were counted in favor of Biden. But almost all of these lawsuits were just slapped down. They weren't accepted because they were unsubstantiated. There was no evidence to back up the claims that they were making. I think there was either I don't even think it was a lawsuit. I think it was just a recount. There were a couple of recounts that took place in some of these swing states. But the funny thing was that after the recounts were done, Biden's margin in whatever state the recount took place in was actually larger than before the recount was done. So there were some Trump votes that weren't counted before the recount that were counted after the recount, but the funny thing was that there was actually more Biden votes that were not counted until the recount took place. So the recount did happen and there were new votes that were counted that previously were not counted, but it actually helped out Biden more than it helped Trump. And that's the thing with all these lawsuits and all these recounts that here's why I don't think that they are useful at all. Because basically the hope for Republicans is that they can file enough lawsuits and enough recounts to the point where they can either invalidate millions of Biden votes or count millions of Trump votes that previously were not counted. But the thing is that it's basically impossible to have that many Trump votes counted that previously were not counted, or that many Biden votes invalidated, while also not affecting the number of Trump votes. For example, in the scenario that I just talked about, where the recount was done, there was a recount that was done, and there were new Trump votes that were counted that previously were not counted. In that same exact recount, there were also Biden votes that were counted in the recount that were not originally counted. So that's what I'm saying. It's basically impossible for Republicans to make up that big of a margin because Democrats currently have 306 electoral votes in the Electoral College, and in all of the swing states that Joe Biden's winning, he's winning by at least 10,000 votes, if not more. In states like Pennsylvania, Biden's winning by, I believe, around 100,000 votes. So making up that big of a margin is basically impossible because that means you would either have to invalidate 100,000 Democratic votes without invalidating any Republican votes, or you have to count 100,000 Republican votes that were previously not counted without counting any Democratic votes that were previously not accounted for. So that is basically impossible, and that is why I've said ever since it was declared on November 7th that Joe Biden was the winner of this presidential election and that it was basically impossible for Republicans to make up the giant margin that they were behind by in the presidential election. Now, if we're talking about the Senate, that's a completely different picture. Republicans actually have a much better chance of winning the Senate than Democrats currently do. We don't currently know the results of that yet because the Georgia runoff elections have not taken place yet. We're going to have to wait a little less than a month for that to happen, but that's besides the point. Point is, Republicans, at least Trump himself, lost the presidential election, and it is too late for that to change. There's nothing that can be done because Biden is just way too far ahead. If this was like a 2000 election scenario where it came down to one state and the margin that one candidate was ahead by another. The margin that one of the candidates was ahead of the other candidate by less than like 1,000 votes. If that situation was taking place, like what happened in 2000, basically, in 2000, Al Gore was behind by only a few hundred votes, and in the end, George Bush ended up winning the state of Florida, the state that Al Gore was behind by 500 votes in. In the end, George Bush ended up winning, but it was by a very narrow margin, and the Supreme Court had to end up deciding that basically they decided that a recount could not be done because there was not enough time left until the actual electoral college votes had to be casted, and ultimately that is why George Bush was able to win the election because the Supreme Court decided not enough time for a recount. Basically, George Bush won the state of Florida by a little more than 500 votes, but 2020, it's a completely different scenario because Joe Biden clearly won the presidential election. He won four more states than he needed to win. He could have lost Georgia, he could have lost Arizona, he could have also lost Nevada. He still would have won the presidential election because of Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, Michigan, and Minnesota. So it's no surprise to me that the lawsuit that was filed by the Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton and obviously supported by President Trump, about to be former President Donald Trump, that lawsuit did not pass through. It's pretty easy to see why, but I thought that it was a pretty important Supreme Court case, regardless, to report on. That is why I'm talking about it in this video. So, this is just one of many lawsuits that have been denied, but I thought this was a pretty important one to talk about because even though it was filed by the Texas Attorney General, it was a lawsuit that many other Republicans from many other states were on board with, and this was something that they were really hoping that they could win, but it's pretty obvious to see why they were not able to win this Supreme Court case. So I just thought that it would be good to talk about this Supreme Court case. Now, the other event that just happened recently regarding the Supreme Court, involving the Supreme Court, took place yesterday evening to be exact, and this involves Brandon Bernard and his execution. So, the backstory behind this case is that Brandon Bernard is currently, or he was, a 40-year-old until he passed away, but basically, around 21 years ago, back in 1999, when he was only 18 years old, he basically assisted a group of a few other teenagers in the killing of a few people. And I guess one of the other people involved in those killings, they have been since been executed. But Brandon Bernard, I don't think he was directly involved in the killing of those people. I don't think like he himself is the reason why those people died, but I think he indirectly assisted the other gang members he was involved with. He indirectly assisted those people in the killing of those people. I believe it was two people that were actually killed by these gang members, and there were five gang members in total. Bernard being one of them. Brandon Bernard was one of those five gang members. Basically, Stacy and Todd Bagley were killed back in 1999, and they were young ministers. So the gunman, I believe the gunman who's named Christopher Vialva, he is ultimately the one that was responsible for the killing of those two people, but I believe Brandon Bernard indirectly assisted him in doing those killings. But just yesterday, last night at 9:27 p.m. Eastern Time, Brandon Bernard was declared to be dead. And basically, he suffered from the death penalty. He got punished with the death penalty for a crime that he committed 21 years ago. And this was a very controversial decision. And the reason why this was very controversial is a lot of people think that he did not deserve the death penalty for a few reasons. One of them was the fact that this crime took place 21 years ago. In my opinion, I don't think that's a reason for the punishment to be any less severe, but the other reasons for people's criticism of this decision, I can really see where they're coming from. Another reason is because he did not directly, he was not directly the reason why these people were killed. Like, he indirectly contributed, but he himself did not actually do the killings. It was the other person involved, the gunman, Christopher Vialva. He was the one who actually did the killings, but I guess Brandon Bernard was indirectly responsible for the killings, even if he wasn't directly responsible. But in that case, I don't think he should have been executed. I think in the case of Brandon Bernard, I think he should have gotten life sentence in prison. I think that would have been the most justified punishment for him. I don't think he should have been killed though. Christopher Vialva, I can definitely see why he was executed. He was actually the one who did the killings, but Brandon Bernard, I don't think he should have actually suffered from the death penalty. I don't think he should have been punished through that means. I think it would have been a lot better if he had gotten life in prison. And apparently, he was actually the youngest person in the United States to receive the death penalty in the past 70, almost 70 years for a crime committed while he was still an adolescent. I guess he was 18 years old, so he was technically an adult, but 18-year-olds, I think, are still classified as adolescents as well. That's the thing, like, if he was a year or two younger and he did the same crime, then he would not have gotten the death penalty, but because he was just over the age of 18, I guess that is why they thought that it was justified to give him the death penalty. Like I said earlier in this video, this was a very controversial decision. A lot of people thought that Brandon Bernard did not deserve the death penalty, but that he instead should have just been given a life sentence in prison, and I actually agree with that. I believe that a death penalty went way too far. I don't think that because he wasn't directly involved in the killing, I don't think he should have gotten the death penalty. I think life in prison would have been the justified punishment for the crime that Bernard committed. But that was what he eventually got, the death penalty. And the reason why the Supreme Court is involved in this, the reason why this has to do with the Supreme Court is because the Supreme Court was actually given a petition yesterday, and a lot of people signed that petition, and the petition basically said to not give Brandon Bernard the death penalty. So this petition was actually filed by notable attorneys Alan Dershowitz and Ken Starr, and basically they filed this petition for Bernard's legal team, and they filed this petition yesterday, I believe. And basically in this petition they stated that they believe that the execution of Brandon Bernard should have been delayed by at least 2 weeks, and basically this would have made it so that they could have gotten more information on Brandon Bernard case, and they could have gotten more information on all the details surrounding the case. But apparently the Supreme Court denied the petition. Only 3 Supreme Court justices were on board with the petition, and these were the 3 Supreme Court justices that have been nominated by Democratic presidents. These include Stephen Breyer, Elena Kagan, and Sonia Sotomayor. So basically, the 3 more liberal Supreme Court justices agreed with the petition, but the other 6 more conservative justices did not agree with the petition, and they struck the petition down. And that is why Brandon Bernard's execution was not delayed, and it actually took place last night at 9:27 p.m. Eastern Time. So apparently this was a case that has been well known for months, but I actually only found out about this case around a week or so ago, or a few days ago, right before the execution actually took place. A lot of people on social media were asking other people to file or to like send an email in order to say why Brandon Bernard did not deserve to be executed. And apparently Kim Kardashian West actually called for Donald Trump to grant a commutation for Bernard. Basically, he wouldn't get executed today. He wouldn't have gotten executed yesterday if Trump had granted that commutation. But Trump did not come through for Bernard. Trump was apparently Brandon Bernard's last hope, but Donald Trump did not come through for him. He did not perform the commutation, and that is why Brandon Bernard was executed last night. So it seems like for this specific case, more people believe, at least based on what I've seen, but this is just anecdotal, more people believe that he did not deserve the death penalty, but he instead should have served life in prison, than the amount of people who think that he actually did deserve the death penalty. I personally agree with the people who think that he should have just gotten life in prison and not the death penalty, but I'm actually curious to see if anyone watching this disagrees with me on that. Does anyone watching this think that he actually did deserve the death penalty? If you think so, I'm curious to see your reasoning why. Feel free to leave a comment down below saying why you believe he did deserve the death penalty. It'll be interesting to see where you're coming from, what your perspective is, because I think that he did not deserve the death penalty, but it'll be interesting to see why other people believe he did deserve the death penalty. Before I finish all this video, I would just like to give credit to CNN for providing the information for both of these Supreme Court cases. I didn't really know that much about either of these Supreme Court cases, either of these Supreme Court rulings, so I had to refer to these articles from time to time throughout this video in order to have a better idea of what actually was going on for these 2 Supreme Court cases.